Well, it's my great privilege today to have on this interview Pastor Kerry from Game Changer Church. Most of you
Come
know
on.
who he is, been a part of our lives over the last couple of years, and has been planting down in the Frisco, Texas area. Rowena and I just got to be there this weekend. And Kerry, what a great job you and Rihanna are doing, your entire team. We've met amazing people. What a great weekend. You're knocking it out of the park. In a school setting, you've dialed into being a mobile church in about 4 weeks, and you've mastered it. We would have needed to take classes from you if we were going to still be mobile.
I just learned from you. I just asked lots of good questions. That's how I got there. So,
well, it was awesome to be with you. And in the airing of this recording is primarily for our team night, and we're talking about being discipleable and also discipling. As a leader, you are not only discipled, but you're discipling other people. And I really wanted to have you on because of a question you asked me as we arrived. You said, "Hey, Steve, when you come in, I want you to take some time and observe what's taking place. And when you walk out of the weekend gathering, I want you to tell me all the things you saw, things that could be adjusted, improved." And so certainly, Sunday morning, it was great. I didn't have many things to put down that needed to change, a lot of good things that were happening. We went out to lunch immediately after, and I didn't even get bite number one into my mouth. And you and your wife leaned forward and said, "What did you see? What do we need to fix? What do we need to change?" And I hadn't even been able to process it. And yet you guys were hungry to get that input. So that's why I have you being interviewed for our group today. And we'll probably post it some other places. So a couple questions that I have for you. You're a lead pastor. But tell me a little bit about this idea of still being a disciple, having people speak into your life, having leaders over you. Is that something you still have, and how does that work for you?
well, Steve, I don't know how long you and I have had relationship with each other, but you've probably figured out in the couple of years that we've known each other, I'm not the sharpest pencil around. Now, I'm not asking you to respond right now to that statement, but the truth is I've learned that when I feel like I am the sharpest in the pencil in the room, that's when I'm kind of heading down a pathway that could mess me up. So it's important that I'm continually, just making sure that I'm not just looking through, the spectacles of what I'm seeing, because others. Mentors, pastors, they see things that I don't see. And so I just got to realize that, I'm just not the smartest guy in the room. And so I've just got to make a decision that, let's just be the dumbest in the room, ask the right questions, because sometimes they might have some valuable things that kind of help me out. And I think I learned something a number of years ago. And the statement was, you can rob a man of 30 years of experience in 30 minutes if you just learn to ask the right questions. So, it's just, leaning into the right questions and having, the listening ear, two ears, one mouth, shut the mouth, listen, because they might have some value for you.
Yeah, I think that like my assessment of how much you value that input is pretty high. I mean, for you to, and I would do a similar thing because I really look forward to pastoral input. As strange as it is, I look forward to correction. And I could tell how quickly, right after the service, you and your wife wanted to get into some adjustments. That must be pretty high on your list. If you were to get a phone call from Pastor Phil or Pastor Simon, who oversees the Americas, and they were to say, "Hey, Kerry, I want to talk to you about," and you could just tell that it was a little weighty.
Yep.
Would you be excited and lean in, or would you be like, "Oh, brother"? What would be your response?
I think quite honestly, initially I'd be like, but for my growth, just go there, allow it. And here's the thing, if I've got a relationship with them, you know what, they're going to say it in love. So, Pastor Steve, as my pastor, as a mentor in my life, there are moments where, okay, everything inside of me is like, but if I want to grow, I have to open up and allow the words of the wise speak into me so that I can go to the next level, because I'm not seeing things.
Well, I agree. I feel the same way that you do. I actually look forward to it. Do you have, in the moment that they're delivering this input to you, this immediate reaction to see their imperfections, do those get in the way when somebody's trying to deliver you some correction? Because like you were asking me about input for your gathering, and I prefaced it by saying, I'm not saying we have these things mastered either. However, and then I led into a couple of different things. Are you able to look beyond your leaders' imperfections and still receive that correction?
Yeah, well, look, you know, Steve, you've got some imperfections.
That's not true. That's a lie. That's a bold-faced lie, you liar.
but you know, look, the truth is that you have weaknesses, but you've got strengths. And it'd be crazy for me to just focus on the weaknesses of a leader over my life. I mean, every leader, I mean, I had the privilege of sitting, you know, in Pastor Phil's church. And, you know, I'm not going to say here that he's got weaknesses, but come on, let's just face it. I'm sure Pastor Chris would point a few things out. In your marriage with your wife, I mean, I'm sure Rowena could point out some faults, but at the end of the day, it's wise for me just to let's not look at the negative side. Let's look at the positive side because they've got strengths in areas that I don't have strength. And so just open myself up, and it could take me to a better day.
That's awesome. Maybe for everyone, name a time where a leader corrected you and you maybe didn't like it. Maybe describe a couple scenarios, maybe when you were much younger, because now you can't wait to get a whooping, but way back in the day, what was your initial response to any type of correction? And give us a couple of those scenarios.
How long have you got? I can remember a time when, as a youth pastor, and I'd stepped into a role, and you know, God was doing some great things as a youth pastor. Well, my senior pastor gave me the opportunity to preach on a Sunday morning. We had we had two services, one in the morning, one at night. And the Sunday morning was kind of the bigger gathering. Nighttime was more youth, young adult sort of flavor. So I got to preach at night a lot more, but Sunday morning was really for the space of the senior pastor, and he gave me the opportunity to preach. And so I was going to bring it, man. I'm the man of faith and power for the hour, and I'm the youth pastor. Now, what you can understand is in this particular church, a Pentecostal church, but very rarely did he do an altar call. In fact, even doing a salvation altar call was just not his thing. It's not that he was close to it. He just personally didn't go down that pathway. You know me, that I'm an altar call person, and that was just part of who I was. And so here's my chance. I'm not only going to deliver a powerful word, but I'm going to have a powerful altar call. And you know, let me interrupt you and ask you a question before you finish your story. Okay, tell the truth. Was part of why you were going to have an altar call, was it pure, you're just going to have an altar call, or was there maybe a little bit of a moment there? I'm just saying what might have been mine, that you wanted to have the altar call to show how it can be done. Oh, for sure. Totally. Because I'd had conversations with my senior pastor. I mean, I remember one time he preached a cracker of a message, and I was just like, man, do a salvation altar call. There's unsaved people here. That message, people are going to get saved. And he just prayed, and that was it. The service was over. And Tuesday, I'm in his office, and I was like, hey, you could have done that. And he said to me, he goes, how do you remember to do an altar call? I just didn't think about that. And I was just like, so yeah, okay, yes, I wanted to do that. But, you know, I just wanted God to move in people's lives. So anyhow, I preached the message, and it was probably the best message that they heard that day. Probably the only message they heard that day. But at the end of it, I did an altar call, and I can't remember what the message was. I have no idea the context of the altar call. But what happened is no one responded. No one moved. Ooh. And I'm standing there going, I can't believe it. These rebellious people. And I didn't say that publicly, but on the inside of me. So that was a powerful word, and you don't want to move. And so in my frustration of no one moving, I said this out publicly. I said, if you don't move, if you choose not to get out of your seat and come down on the altar, you're telling God that you don't want to grow in your faith any further for the rest of your life. And I could see the whole place shut down in the place. And Man, and I was ticked off at them, and I just thought, oh well, I prayed, and I got off. I sat down, and I was like, well, you know what, powerful message. Well, no one really said much to me after the service, but Tuesday, back in the office, I got called into the senior pastor's office. And I'd moved on from that moment. I thought, man, he's going to tell me I'm a better preacher and that you're back on this Sunday morning. I just thought, man, I'm going to get lined up with preaching gigs. And he then told me that there were a lot of people that were offended the way I communicated, how I did that altar call. And I was kind of defensive on everything at that time. He then said to me, I couldn't believe it. He said to me, Pastor Steve, he said, next Sunday morning, I need you to get up on stage and apologize to the church, your conduct. Yes. I said, you've got to be joking me. I said, come on, they're rebellious. And I had my words at that moment. And, but I had to suck that up and stand up the following Sunday morning and apologize to people, my conduct. Now, okay, so everything inside of me was not wanting to do it. I didn't see there was a place for it. I just thought they needed to open up themselves. But see, what I did, number one, is I've won the people back by me humbling myself. But number two, it taught me to communicate in a better way and actually do altar calls a lot powerful. And so as a result of me just humbling myself and doing what my leader did, it actually set me up for a win later on in life. If I'd not done that, I think doors for me preaching in that church would have shut, and future opportunities in other places would have shut. And I just would have been a harsh guy in the pulpit. And so I'm thankful that he actually pushed me to get in front of the church and say, I'm sorry.
That's a fantastic story. I expected the altars were going to be filled and you're going to be filled with pride and start your own church called the Kerry Robertson Church, but it worked in an amazing way. How valuable was that? I mean, that's huge. Let me ask you a different question. Okay, now that you're leading people, just talk in general terms, if you can come up with a couple of different things. Obviously, discipling people, there's a lot of encouragements, probably 90% encouragement, accolades. You did a great job. Appreciate how you handled yourself, but there's probably some common themes that cause you to lean forward in dealing with a leader, because people on the team, they kind of put their hand up to be discipled, right? And so what would be a couple of recurring things that you see where that you have to lean in as a leader and maybe address something? Are there a couple themes that you can think of off the top of your head?
Well, I won't be hypothetical. Let me just, as you know, I had a church in Australia for 12 years. And so I can think of questions and moments for sure. I remember a particular time where a guy showed up. He was a professional musician, and he was phenomenal. He every weekend he was playing in some club. He was amazing on guitar, amazing on the bass. He just knew how to make it work. He was one of these guys that not only could read music well, but he could listen, hear it, and then he could do the riff. He could get in there and make that thing happen. He also had a voice. And so, he was very skilled at what he did. Well, he turned out new to his faith. And he was like, Pastor, whatever you want me to do in the place, I can help you. And so, after a while, he, being in church, he found himself into the team, and we were in a season where we did need some other players. What happened though is that he became quite critical of just things around the place. And it started out critical with, just how other musicians played because they weren't as professional as him. And then discovered that there was little whispers going on between other people that, were obviously better than that person that's not performing. And there was just those sorts of comments. And I noticed this trait of him being quite a critical person. And I had to go in and address it because I've learned this, that if I don't address the culture, then the culture is going to address me. I'll say it another way. If I don't direct culture, the culture will direct me. And so as a leader, I need to be watching my culture at all times. And so what I want in the culture of my church is I want a positive and a celebrating environment. I want people to know, and I tell people that the way I am in front of you is the way I am behind you. And so you're not going to get another Kerry Robertson having little secret whispers about you, Pastor Steve, about I can't believe that, this guy, that's not who I am. And that's not the church we are. And so in public and private, we speak highly of each other. And so that's kind of what it is. And so I leant in with a conversation with them. One of the things I've learned is not just to tell the people the what and the how. I wasn't just going to say, hey, that's not what we do here, and this is how you're going to do it in the future. I actually need to tell people the why. Because if you as a leader do not tell your people, your team, the why, they're going to just not totally understand exactly what's needed. So I needed to lean into them to say, hey, you are professional, but these are volunteers. And that person that you're critical about is a teenager that picked up those drums only a year ago. And it's going to take them a long time to get there. And what an opportunity you have to mentor them out of the season they're in to where you need to get them. You can become an influence in their life. And I gave the why to actually mentor them out of being in a critical space to where they needed to get to. That worked for that guy for a season, but because of his continual critical thinking, it eventually caused him to bounce, and discovered that he's got a history of bouncing from church to church because of a critical nature that he's got about people, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of people out there that just don't get that, can't correct that, and they find themselves bouncing from place to place.
That's a not an uncommon story. Overall, if you give me some sort of percentage, in approaching people for a moment of adjustment, smoothing off a rough edge, in your experience, what percentage of people respond openly and thank you and then are willing to work on it, as opposed to those that either give you this attitude like, who are you to even talk to me about this, down to the opposite end of the spectrum of, you're completely wrong, you don't know what you're talking about. What does that balance look like, just from your perspective as a lead pastor? Because you get a lot of years of having some of those tough conversations. Overall, what would you say is a response?
I would find it very hard for me to put a percentage on it. But now, first of all, you got to understand, I'm not by nature a confrontational person. I'm a person that loves to extend grace and give people time, and I look for ways to teach people before I have to go in there hard and actually sit them down and go, here's a come to Jesus moment, let's talk about this. I would say that a bit more, at least 60-70% are kind of open, but then there's people that just do not want to listen. And if people have had a background where they have been beaten, when I say beaten, like had negative leadership experience, maybe they've had parents that were very critical of them, or an environment that was very critical, or maybe they had a boss that treated them badly. Sometimes that wound, if it's not healed, can cause people to bring the cards close, and that they find it very hard to respond. And so I've got to navigate that with people. I remember the same pastor when I was a youth pastor that I dealt with, he would say all the time, in the kingdom of God, there's no such thing as failures, just resets. I'll say it again. There's no such thing as failures in the kingdom of God, just resets.
Oh, reset. Let me do the English interpretation.
Well, you can do it if you want. Yep.
No, the interpretation of what you said, because I couldn't tell what you're saying. In your New Zealander, it's reset. Correct? Is that what you were saying? Resets?
Oh, reset. See, when you fail an exam at school, there were certain exams that it was just a failure. That's it. But a lot of exams that we had, you got to resit the exam if you got it wrong.
Reset.
And so reset, exactly. And so here he's saying is that there's no failures in the kingdom of God, just resets. So that simply means that, okay, if I fail at this test I'm going through right now, then I'll just get to have another shot at that down the track.
Yeah.
And what I've seen so often people that go into moments where God allows a situation for us to be tested, and I have to respond. Do I respond kingdom or do I respond negatively, right? And if I don't deal with it now, then guess what? I get to reset that other test later on. Yeah. And I've seen people that went through a test in my church, and some of these people went through the same test in their previous church, turned up in our place, went through the same thing with different people, but kind of the same thing. And guess what? They may move to another church, but guess what? You're going to have to reset the exam when you get there. So my question that I say to people is, how long do you want to walk around the mountain? Yeah. Do you want to be like the Israelites and do this for 40 years, 40 different churches? Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's important when I'm going through a moment that I can get defensive. I can close up. I can respond negatively. I can go critical. I can gossip, or I can actually become the bigger person and go, all right, okay, God, I'm hearing you, because I don't want to reset this exam. It's too painful for me to go through this again.
There is so much truth in what you're describing. I experienced that, people coming into the church while in my church and after they've left. God, I
find that very hard to believe under your leadership, but carry on.
Well, that's true, but I've heard it. I observed where people think that by making a change, somehow God is distracted. I watch my grandsons try to do this. They try to do something, grandma is trying to correct them, and then they like, oh, what's that? And she's not distracted. And in baseball, if you run past first base but don't touch it, you can run and touch second, you can try to run and touch third. None of that counts, because the umpire is always going to send you back to the base that you needed to touch. And I've found that to be true with myself, with God. A reset, as you've described it, is 100% truth. That is really, really, really good, and great, especially for this setting right here. Thank you for that. That's
gold right there.
It is gold, because I'll be really honest, there's a couple of lessons that I didn't learn early, and I don't know if I was corrected or not, but they were things that I continued to struggle with in leadership or pastoring, that now into my 50s, finally there's this aha moment, and you look back over 4 decades or 3 decades of pastoring and saying, would that I had learned that 30 years ago, then I would have escaped so many of those moments where I did the same thing, reacted the same way, or didn't handle, a certain thing because of, fear or whatever. And you find yourself finally learning the lesson, but quite late in the game.
I'd like to give you two stories. One was when I was 16 years of age. Now I'm kind of a little embarrassed to say this, but I was in a drum and bugle band when I was exactly. And, that's right.
Oh, this is worth the money.
I used to play the bugle.
Go ahead and do plein air bugle for me right now. Let me see what.
There you go. So anyhow, I was part of that, and so it was learning that skill. But we would enter into competitions, marching and band competitions up against other bands similar. Well, as I got older, I became the band
director.
Major. There was the guy at the front that had the stick, the twirly thing, you know what I mean? And my job is to direct them.
Very manly. It's a very manly role.
Exactly. And you can see why I'm embarrassed to talk about this. But anyhow, the guy who oversaw the entire band was a guy that was in his mid to late 50s. He was an ex-military commander. He had a voice. I mean, you could hear it 5 miles away. I mean, he just had this booming voice. Well, it was coming down to the final moments before one big competition, and we're in a school field, we're practicing our stuff, and here he is shouting stuff out. And because here I am doing commands with my stick in ways that are wrong. Well, it was right, because last week I did exactly what he told me the week before. And this week he changed his mind about things. And I was getting ticked off, and the rest of the band knew that he changed his mind, and I'm getting ticked off. And so because they're ticked off and I'm ticked off, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it this guy. And I just delivered, just my response to him. And well, while I'm trying to do this, next thing I hear the shout of my dad going, Kerry, shut your mouth right now. And I'm just like, straight away, this is my dad. And I just shut down, and he rebuked me, and he pulled me aside, and he goes, and he knew that the sergeant was wrong, but he said, it's your attitude. The way you're delivering it is wrong. There's nothing wrong with challenging leadership, but your reaction to him is wrong. Wow. And so it was just a moment in my early life that, hey, you know what? I can sometimes with leadership, I can, when I'm feeling like I'm right, or I'm feeling like they're not getting it, that I can come back in an abusive way, but actually just being reasonable and sitting down and talking things through, I can actually see where they're coming from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
When Rihanna and I got married, we were part of a church. It was very large. It was a church. It was very progressive, strong leadership. And there was a ministry call on my life. And I remember Rihanna and I setting an appointment with the pastor, sitting down with him. And we had a burden on the inside of us, a calling inside of us. And we took that to him. And we said, hey, this is what we feel like God is saying. And we would just ask that you would go away and pray about it and hear from God, whether you think it's God or not. And we honestly wanted to hear him respond, take it away, pray about it, because it actually meant that we would no longer be in that church if we went down this pathway. We were very open. Should he pray about it and things like that. What happened is he immediately just started getting very abusive to us. And he actually told us, he said, if you do this, your life will be cursed, your ministry will be cursed. Wow. And he was using those words, your whole life would fall apart. And I mean, it was horrible. Well, next thing, there were letters being sent to pastors all over the country. In fact, I was living in New Zealand at the time. I even met a pastor 5 years later in Perth, Australia, who got the same letter about me. I mean, it was crazy just what went down at the time. But I tell you all that because I was incredibly hurt through that situation. He went as far as telling our best friends, don't hang out with Kerry and Rianne. And we just were saying, hey, pray about it. And had he prayed about it and done that, we would have just gone, that's fine. But that response, we were so hurt about it. Well, we took it to a mentor in our life. And he said this to me, and I've never forgot these words. He said, whether you think you're right or wrong in the situation, God is more concerned about your attitude.
Oh, wow.
I'll say that again. Whether you think you're right or wrong in the situation, God is more concerned about your attitude.
That's great.
So that meant that Rihanna and I needed to shift something in our hearts because, okay, some of the things that were said wrong, but our response to it had gone to a place of being wrong ourselves. And we had become high and mighty about it. And we thought that we had a point to be able to, gossip about them. Well, actually, no. We actually needed to become the bigger people as far as we were concerned. And actually just get an attitude right where we're going to pray for these guys. We're going to bless them in the name of Jesus, speak well of them. We're going to shut our mouth when everything inside of us wants to talk about it. Well, you know what? God has restored that relationship. And if I walked into that church, if I ran into them, there'd be hugs and there'd be love. There'd be things that are there. I guess why I'm saying all that is because had I not heard those words about making sure my attitude is right, I don't think I'd be where I am today.
Oh, agreed. What a great lesson to learn young, because you can get a lot of mileage out of telling that story of what that pastor did to you. it's clearly wrong. I don't know what his motives were. It's also, especially if people were to know the name and you name the name and the church and all of that, it would be a tasty morsel. I mean, it'd be like, wow, that's a pretty exciting thing. But I think the only thing you'd really end up doing while you're telling your story is recoding yourself with the very debris that you're talking about. That would be definitely a lesson for me learned much later in life. That's a perfect example of one of those things that I wish I had learned younger, because there's always a good juicy story, a backside that's dishonoring as to why you left someplace or whatever. But one of the things I do love about C3 and being a part of the C3 family is that commitment to honoring, to being able to, obviously you have to talk specifics with key people, but once you've resolved the situation to move forward, the ability to speak highly of characteristics of a person or a situation that you're not making something up here. You're not flattering. You're actually speaking truths and focusing on truths that are worth focusing on, and avoiding the subject that really doesn't apply to anybody else on the planet. You know what I mean? So yeah. What a great lesson. Final question I have for you. How would you encourage somebody who would say, I struggle with criticism or correction. I don't like it. I've had bad experiences. I see they're not perfect either. To be quite honest with you, I should be the one telling them what they're doing wrong. What would you say to somebody who's struggling with, maybe deep down in their hearing this, they wish that being teachable was part of their arsenal, but it's not? What would you encourage them to do to get that adjustment in their life?
I would throw it back with a question to you and say this: would you want to continue walking around the mountain?
Yeah.
It'd be like the Israelites that spent 40 years. I think there are a lot of people that will get to their latter years of their life and their retirement years and look back and go, you know what, I had a chance and opportunity and did nothing with it. I could have learned the lesson back there and I'd be better off today. So I think that's what you've got to think through. It's like, okay, you've heard it said before, it's either play now, pay later, or you pay now and get to play later. I think you're just in the same situation, is that if we learn now, we get to enjoy a better day. And so I think if you're out there, you're struggling with this, you know what, there's nothing wrong with you actually sitting down with someone that is loving. And thank God that you're in a church that has a pastor. I mean, Pastor Steve is one of the most loving, encouraging guys I know. Now, there's probably been moments where he's been ticked off with me. Probably not, maybe, I don't know. But
we'll talk after the recording's done.
Yeah. But there have been some dark moments I've had where I've just got on the phone and I said, Pastor Steve, and he spoke life into me. And so by able to sit down with someone and actually just go, you know what, I struggle with this, and can you just speak into this? Actually just allows a relational connection to take place. And so I think that it's just important that you just kind of just lean in for the sake of your future, for your marriage and your kids. I know one lady, can I just give one last story?
Yep.
It was a season where in Australia where the church was flourishing, was going incredibly well. We had a doctor in the church, and she was awesome. And not only was she awesome with people, but she was also very generous with her money. She helped people out. Well, next thing I discovered, there was this critical thing that started to build around her life. Next thing, you ready for this? 45 people she sucked out of the church.
Wow.
And she decided she's going to go and start her own church with these 45 people. And so every Sunday morning, what they would do is they would meet together and they would listen to the recordings of our message the week before, and they would discuss where the theological discrepancies were, and they would just go negative about us. That's what their Sunday morning service was all about. Within 3 months, 3 marriages busted up. And that lady today, the last I heard, is no longer in church. Someone that had influence, someone that could do incredible things in the kingdom of God. But because they chose to not be teachable in a situation, and not, sit the test, unfortunately, is no longer the influence or the kingdom impact that she's called to be. And so you don't just want to be another statistic. You want to be someone that is counted as one of those legends in the kingdom of God. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's great input. I see submission as a highly desirable thing. I joke every time I watch a country and western movie where, there's a fire in the cabin and all the ammunition starts shooting all around and people are diving because they're afraid they're going to get shot. And actually, that's a make-believe man-made scenario. It would never happen like that, because a ammunition that's not pressed into the chamber of a gun, the load is not directed, and there is no trajectory for the lead that's part of that ammunition. It's not until you take, if you've ever looked at a bullet and put it up against the barrel of a gun, you try to imagine to yourself, because you can't push it in the end of the barrel, you try to imagine, how could this ever even get in there to come out? But it's that submission to something that feels incredibly restrictive that actually causes that load to fire in a specified direction and hit a target. And I honestly long for that. I'm so glad in the C3 family to have a number of people who can speak into my life that way. I speak into other people's lives, but I have people, and you're one of them, who speaks into my life. There's been moments where I've called you. It's been a two-way street, and going through a difficult season and saying, what do you see? What do you think I should do? And hungry to hear the answer, because I know that if I listen to those voices, now these aren't just any voice, you get to choose your leaders. And a lot of people choose their leaders in a season of celebration. And what I'd say is the leader that you choose in your season of celebration and encouragement should be the one that you stick with in the dark time when you're being corrected. All of a sudden, you don't want them to be a leader. There's a problem with that role. But I look forward to being able to that person to speak into my life who I've celebrated with. They've encouraged me. And now they say, hey, Steve, I want to talk to you about something that I think is worth talking about. Oh, man, I want to lean in because I don't want to miss the mark. And the older I get, the less time there is to fire at the target. And so it becomes even more valuable now that I'm older and a lead pastor to have those voices in my life, for sure.
One of the things I like to do, and you saw me do this on the weekend, Sunday night, I had an all-in team meeting. It was our first all-in team meeting. Before I introduced you, I said to you, hey, this guy here is my pastor. I'm accountable to him. And I purposely verbalize that because I want people to know that I'm accountable, because if I'm giving direction, they need to know that I'm being given direction. And I think that if you are a number 2, number 3, if you're leading a connect group or you're running a team, here in this church, then people need to know who you're accountable to, that you're actually green and allowing someone to speak into your life. Because here's the thing, is that you reap what you sow. And you've got to remember that if you give grief to your oversight, you're going to get grief from others underneath you. And I've seen this with pastors and other churches that, they reap what they sow, because their people are just driving them crazy because they've, not received it from upwards. So all I'm saying is this, is that, let people know who you're accountable to.
That's great input. Well, I appreciate very much the time and the insight. I do see you as one of those people that really, you're a great encourager. I learn a lot from how you encourage, and that's the 90% of the discipleship process. I would say I've been really weak in that area historically. I come out of a background where I didn't experience that, and so just simply observing how you do it, and even how you do it from the pulpit, has helped me to elevate my game in that area. And I also know that you love that input, that correction. I value that as well. But to be able to as pastors, to be transparent about that process in our lives, I appreciate you taking the time to do that, because I think that a lot of times people in a church might feel like it's a one-way street. He's always telling me how it should be, so who's telling him? And the truth is, you got a number of people. I would be one of them, and then it's flipped around the same way. You're on our board of directors, and you have that same voice into my life, and it's welcomed. And if there's a moment where it's needed, I know that you'd have no problem at all leaning in and having that dialogue. And if that moment came, I'm going to be leaning in and be all ears, because I value your input because of who you are. So with that, thanks for taking the time with us. Thanks for being
It's
on.
good to be back on the screen with you.
Well, we're going to be, as soon as we get into our building, you're going to be likely our first guest speaker, celebrating our brand new campus there in Orchards. We're excited about that. What a miracle that has been. Hopefully it's sooner than later. They're working this week on it, and look forward to getting you in there and showing it off and having a good time and get back to the business of building the church. So with that, we're going to sign off. Tell your family we said, hey, God bless you.
Love you guys.
Love you too. See ya.